Good morning, this is Swift Justice with Unheard Voices OTCJ and the Free Alabama Movement, and I am also a member of the Jailhouse Lawyers Speak. And I just wanted to bring to the table one of our demands that we have that is inside of the 10 national demands of the prison strike that has been floating around all over the internet since August and before. So the one that I picked out is one of my favorites. I mean, one of the ones I think is the most important, and that is demand number 2. The demand number 2 of the 10 national prison strike demands is, and I quote, an immediate end to prison slavery, which, if you don't know, is made out by the federal and state constitutions of the United States. And what that means is slavery is still going on in our country today. So let's take a look at why we have called for the removal of the exception clause, which is what we call it, which is legalized slavery as a punishment for crime. Then let's look at the benefits in removing the exception clause, not only for the ones confined, but, and this is something that I really want you to pay attention to, but for you, the taxpayer, shall I call you the investor. First, why remove slavery from the practice of American traditions? First question. One, let's look at what the document we call the Constitution of the United States is. Let's define that word. And I'm going to do this by quoting the Merriam-Webster Intermediate Dictionary. Constitution. The Constitution, or a Constitution, is the act of establishing, making, or setting up. Number 2, the physical makeup of an individual. Pay attention to that one. The structure, composition, or basic qualities of something. The basic beliefs and laws of a nation, state, or social group that establish the powers and duties of the government and guarantee certain rights to the people in it. A document containing a constitution. Now, for the sake of this topic, what I want to do is let's look at the definition of constitutional, which is an adjective, by the way. Of or relating to a person's physical or mental makeup. Let me repeat that. Constitutional, which is an adjective, means of or relating to a person's physical or mental makeup. Of, relating to, or in agreement with a constitution. And finally, constitutional amendment or right. Now let's look at what the purpose of the document we call the United States Constitution, and why did the author, James Madison, think it important to establish that. The United States Constitution is a document which outlines the responsibilities of 3, now catch this, of 3 of the 4 branches of government. Those 4 branches being the executive branch, which for those who don't know is the president and the vice president, the administration, or administrative branch, should I say, which is the Congress, the judicial branch, which is the court, and we're going to be specific about that, specifically the Supreme Court, and finally and foremost, the jury. Now, the jury is not officially recognized by the Constitution as a branch of government. Why? Because the jury is of the people. So you got to look at that. So it's just assumed to be given as a factor since the people ultimately wield the majority of the power. In fact, for those of you who are unaware, it is only the jury which has the right to overrule the Supreme Court of the United States through a legal concept known as jury nullification. If you don't know what jury nullification is, I suggest that you look that up. Furthermore, it's a list of governmental prohibitions, things the government is not allowed to do. Take for example, such as pass no law respecting establishment of religion and so on, right? The most powerful of those prohibitions are contained in the first 10 amendments of the United States Constitution. So if you're not familiar with the first 10 constitutions, I suggest that you look them up. But those first 10 constitutional amendments are known as the Bill of Rights. Get this though. These prohibitions were designed with careful so-called thought and much so-called debate and discussion among the framers, which was James Madison and many others. Their alleged goal was to ensure that the federal government did not interfere with what they, the framers, believed to be, catch this, believed to be fundamental and natural rights of mankind. So what do I mean by fundamental natural rights of mankind? We're talking human rights, God-given rights. So does the Constitution give you rights? That's another question. Not so much. God gives you rights. Your God gives you rights. To sum it up, the purpose of the Constitution is to define the governmental structure of the Republic, restrict the power of the government, place the majority of the power in the hands of the states and the people, and defines what we believe to be fundamental human rights, God-given rights. Now, let's take a look into why the 13th Amendment came into existence. Before the existence of the 13th Amendment, we had an issue that started a war in 1861 and lasted until 1865, and many of you probably know that I'm talking about the Civil War, which many claim, we're talking about many historians here, that claim was started because of the accumulation of a series of confrontations concerning the institution of slavery. It's taught it was over a moral issue of slavery. However, it seems to be very much the economics of slavery and political control of that system, which is what we are exposed to today. But if we stick to the original so-called purpose, the Civil War was started over, and purpose of the 13th Amendment, what we're going to do is we'd say it was a moral purpose, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm very quickly going to show you why that is not plausible. First, let's back up. I asked what was the purpose of the Constitution. Remember that, right? The answer is in the summary. Or the answer is in summary to prohibit the government from infringing on human rights, God-given rights. Human rights are God-given rights. Well, now, if the Civil War was actually fought over the moral issues of the God-given rights to not be a slave, then why would we include the exception clause in the 13th Amendment? Remember, the Constitution is for restricting the government, not the people. However, the exception clause empowers the government to own slaves. I don't get that. Let's read this. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to read the 13th Amendment verbatim. And I quote, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, wherefore the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So in essence, the author of the 13th Amendment says it's morally wrong for individuals to own slaves. It's a human right violation for an individual person to hold me as a slave. But it's not morally wrong for the government to own slaves. It's not morally wrong for an entity of people to own slaves. That leads me to this question: who is the government of the United States? The preamble of the United States Constitution answers that question in its first three words. We, the people. You, your neighbor, all American people, are the government. Hence why we have the fourth branch of the government, the jury. You, the people, who are the only individuals, the only entity that can override the Supreme Court of the United States. Are you following where I'm going with this? If you say it's morally wrong to enslave a man, woman, or child, or as an individual, it's morally wrong for you as the government, the investor, which is you, to own slaves. So let's move on. In the National Prison Strike demand number 2, we demand that as persons, human beings, imprisoned in any place or detention under the United States jurisdiction be paid the prevailing wage in our state or territory for our labor while confined. Why is that? Why are we demanding that? Let's start with we are exercising our God given rights as human beings to be free from slavery. Let's start with that one. Slavery is a crime against humanity. This breaks and dehumanizing, it breaks the dehumanization of those who are confined. If we do away with the exception clause and no slavery exists, not even punishable by crime. Now let's look at how this benefits both confined citizens and you, the investor, the government. While someone is confined in prison, earning a wage for his or her labor, he or she has the opportunity to A, pay any and all what? Fines and restitution that he or she may have accumulated. Man, you would be surprised at the fines or restitution that the government never actually gets and goes unpaid. That's just, I don't even agree with the fines and restitution, etc. But that's part of the law. So why are we not collecting, or you, should I say, why are you not collecting the fines and restitution? Number two, confined citizens can provide financial stability for wife, child, whoever was in the family household at that time that they were arrested, convicted, and sent to prison. You will be surprised at the very high percentage of convicted men in our prisons today who were the main source of income in the homes and were living in the home with their child, or children at the time of their arrest. That in itself opens up the doors for more people to have to wind up turning to crime when that main source of income is taken out of the home. But by providing income while incarcerated and having to perform labor, that financial income of that confined citizen can help out with the children and wife that's left behind. These confined citizens can, in fact, do their prison time, and where this is a third benefit. They can do their prison time without being a financial burden on the families because now they will have money of their own to spend on store and canteen items as of right now, which aid to the financial cost of their incarceration. The cost, and check this out. This is the fourth one. The court system no longer will suffer with indigent litigation fees, having to foot the bill. Millions and millions and millions of dollars of litigation are lost in our judicial system annually due to indigent, my tongue's retired this morning, indigent litigation. That will end because now individuals who are going through the courts can actually pay for the filing fees in these courts. Number five, the recidivism rates will drop dramatically because now confined citizens will have a financial cushion once they're released, which will provide the ability to have a home, a car, and food instead of re-entering into society broke without these things, having to turn back to the streets or crime or welfare or whatnot. This also saves the taxpayer from having to provide the formerly incarcerated on food stamps, etc. And we could keep going on and on and on and on how this can benefit the investor as well as the confined citizen upon their release and while they're in prison. But I just wanted to touch on that. I know I've already spent close to 15 minutes on this, but this is just a smaller topic. I want to hear your insight on this and really pay attention to what the Constitution is for. It's to prohibit the government. And the question is, if the government at one time said that it is morally wrong to enslave an individual, it is morally wrong for the government to enslave an individual. I'm going to leave you with that. Peace.